Welcome to today's explainer. So, picture this. You're walking down the grocery aisle, you pick up a product, and right there on the front is a huge, bold claim. 100% greener, eco-friendly. And you kind of have to wonder, how do they actually prove that? Are they just making it up? Well, today we're going to demystify exactly how companies scientifically back up these green claims. We're diving into the incredibly strict international rules, specifically the ISO standards, of a life cycle assessment, or LCA. We're going to focus on the final, absolutely critical phase of this whole scientific process to see how environmental data is interpreted, vetted, and ultimately put right in front of you. Here's our quick roadmap for today. We're going to cover 1. The meaning of interpretation. 2. Identifying significant issues. 3. Putting data to the test. 4. Reporting and critical review. And finally, number 5, the main event, carton versus plastic bottle. To really ground these abstract concepts, we're going to apply these LCA interpretation rules directly to a super relatable case study. We're doing a direct environmental showdown between a standard 1-liter juice carton and a 1-liter PET plastic bottle. So by the end of this explainer, you won't just know who wins the green crown. You'll understand the rigorous scientific framework that actually determines that winner.
All right, Section 1, the meaning of interpretation.
Before we can declare a winner in our beverage container showdown, we really need to understand the framework that stops companies from just, well, making up results to look good. In the world of life cycle assessments, Phase 4 is known as the interpretation phase. It's essentially the bookend to the very first phase of the study, which sets the goal and scope. Basically, here in Phase 4, practitioners take all that raw data they've gathered about emissions and resource use, and they check if the final results actually align with the original goals. It's that vital link between raw, messy data and actual, actionable recommendations. Looking at the ISO 4040 framework here, you can see Phase 4 sitting squarely on the right, acting as the ultimate filter. It's constantly taking data inputs from Phase 1, Phase 2's inventory analysis, and Phase 3's impact assessment. The whole shebang flows into this interpretation box. Every single piece of data is evaluated comprehensively before a single conclusion, limitation, or recommendation ever gets written down. Moving right along to Section 2, identifying significant issues. So how do scientists actually sift through these massive mountains of data to figure out what really matters? Well, according to the strict ISO 1444 standard, interpreting data is definitely not a free-for-all. Practitioners are required to move sequentially through 3 core steps. First, identify the significant issues based on the data. Second, apply various specific evaluation techniques to that data. And only then, step 3, can they start formulating their conclusions and limitations. This structured approach is totally crucial. It ensures no minor details are overblown and that the final claims actually reflect reality.
And the crucial point here is what the source text calls the famous wagging finger motif from ISO 1440. The standard is constantly wagging its finger at practitioners, warning them not to overinterpret their results. See, LCA results only indicate potential environmental effects. They do not predict actual, absolute, real-world impacts or risks. It's a great reminder that science requires humility, right? The data shows us trends and potentials, not absolute certainties. Which brings us to Section 3, putting data to the test.
How do we make sure the data isn't hiding some fatal flaw? Well, during the evaluation step, the data gets vigorously interrogated. It's a lot like solving a mystery. First up, the completeness check ensures you actually have all the puzzle pieces needed to make a claim. If data is missing, you have to lower your expectations. Then, there's the sensitivity check, which stress tests the data. Like, if you change one variable, does the whole conclusion collapse? And finally, the consistency check. This ensures you aren't comparing apples to oranges. If you're comparing 2 products, things like data quality, system boundaries, and regional validity have to be totally consistent across both. To actually pull off this evaluation mathematically, practitioners rely on specific tools, and one of the biggest ones is the contribution analysis. Think of this as a sectoral analysis tool that pinpoints exactly which parts of a product's life cycle are causing the heaviest environmental burdens. It breaks down the total impact to show us, for instance, whether the raw materials, the manufacturing process, or the end-of-life disposal is the dominant culprit. All right, on to Section 4, reporting and critical review. Once the data is tested, we reach the courtroom trial of our explainer. The ISO standards actually have different tiers of review depending on what a company plans to do with the data. If a company just wants to use the LCA internally for, say, product development, they can just use internal or external experts to review it.
But, and this is a massive but, if a company wants to publicly assert that their product is environmentally superior to a competitor's on the open market, an internal check just doesn't cut it. The rules strictly mandate a critical review by a full panel of interested parties.
So, why is this panel mandatory? Because let's be honest, the temptation for companies to present their data in the absolute best possible light is incredibly high. This mandatory third-party review acts as a vital safeguard against what the source text calls the whitewashing of results, which is basically what we call greenwashing today. The reviewers step in to ensure the methods are technically valid, the data is totally appropriate, and the report is transparent, all to protect us consumers from misleading marketing.
And now, Section 5, Carton versus Plastic Bottle.
Let's finally see how all this theory builds into that ultimate payoff we promised. Applying all those strict ISO rules, researchers conducted a massive assessment, and the net results across 8 environmental categories are pretty decisive. The beverage carton boasts significantly smaller indicator values in 6 of the 8 regarded environmental categories compared to the PET bottle. For instance, the carton has a drastically lower impact on the greenhouse effect and fossil resource consumption.
But using our trusty contribution analysis tool, we can see exactly why. The plastic bottle suffers massively in aquatic eutrophication, which is basically nutrient pollution that creates dead zones in water. Why? Because the bottle contains 5% of a material called PA, or polyamide granulates. And incredibly, despite being a tiny fraction of the bottle's mass, producing those granulates causes 90% of the bottle's aquatic impact. On the flip side, the contribution analysis shows us exactly where the carton falls short. It actually lags behind plastic when it comes to summer smog and, unsurprisingly, forest land use, since, cartons require wood pulp.
But the researchers wanted to be absolutely sure they weren't over-interpreting, so they performed a sensitivity check. They asked, what if we stress test the data with a major technical upgrade? They simulated a plastic bottle made with 25% recycled PET, or rPET, alongside an improved sorting process. The goal was to see if these technical optimizations could flip the outcome and actually make plastic the winner.
The results of that sensitivity check were super striking. Even after heavily stress testing the data with 25% recycled plastic and altering the mathematical allocation rules, the specific environmental differences remained permanent. Yeah, the margin shifted a little bit, but the carton still maintained its overall environmental advantages in those same key categories. Because of this, the researchers could confidently conclude that the relative positioning between the carton and the plastic bottle was incredibly robust and scientifically sound.
So, this entire process just goes to show how much rigorous, behind-the-scenes work goes into proving a single environmental claim. Numbers can so easily be used to swindle if they aren't kept in check. So the very next time you're walking down that grocery aisle and you see countless eco-friendly labels shouting at you, ask yourself, was this actually critically reviewed by an independent ISO panel, or is it just a marketing team hoping you won't ask any questions? Thanks for joining me on today's Explainer, and definitely keep asking the hard questions.